Behind this glass is a broken piece of bronze. But this fragment once belonged to a machine that tried to turn the sky. At first, it does not look like a machine. It looks like something that the sea almost erased. The question is not only what survived, it is what this broken object was built to show.
Most of the machine is gone. What remains is damaged, compressed, and corroded into fragments.
And yet, from pieces like this, researchers began to recognize something far larger than the object itself. The outside tells us it was broken. The inside tells us it was designed. On its surface were traces of words. Inside it were traces of gears. But this story did not begin in a museum. It began under the sea. For nearly 2,000 years, the machine lay beneath the Mediterranean. Salt, pressure, and corrosion had almost erased what it once was. Then divers began lifting objects from the wreck.
Many of the fragments were fused together by the sea.
It came from a shipwreck, carrying statues, cargo, and fragments of another world.
Only after recovery could researchers begin to understand what they were looking at.
At first glance, the fragments still looked impossible to read. To understand the object, researchers would need to look beneath its surface. To see beyond the corrosion, researchers turned to imaging technology. Inside the fragments were shapes no one expected to find.
Not decoration, not random damage. Gear teeth. Fragments of writing survived beside the mechanism. Piece by piece, patterns began to connect.
The object was not chaotic. It was engineered.
But much of the mechanism was still missing.
Researchers began reconstructing the machine hidden inside the fragments.
The surviving pieces were real. The complete machine had to be inferred.
Behind every gear was a human hand. The machine did not emerge from mystery. It emerged from craft.
To rebuild the machine, we have to imagine the world that could make it.
The first step was not metal. It was measurement. The sky had to become geometry before it could become gears. Then the design had to survive contact with bronze.
Each tooth demanded a decision. Too deep, and the gear would fail. Too shallow, and it would not move.
This was not rough metalwork. It required repeatable precision. A gear alone is only a shape. On an axle, it becomes part of a system. When one wheel turned, another answered.
The movement needed a face, a chord, a surface where time could be read. And if one part resisted, the maker had to correct it by hand.
Piece by piece, the machine began to move as one. The gears were not built to measure the machine. They were built to measure the heavens. One part of the machine tracked the changing phases of the moon. The mechanism did not simply display the sky. It anticipated it. It may even have tracked the cycles that govern eclipses.
A shadow crossing the sun could be reduced to rotating bronze. To its users, this was not magic. It was knowledge made visible.
The heavens became ratios, intervals, and repeating motion.
And somewhere beyond the workshop walls, the real sky continued to move. The sky changed constantly, but its patterns repeated.
The knowledge was no longer only in the mind of the observer.
In a box small enough to carry, the ancient world compressed the movements of the cosmos. And in the darkness, the bronze kept turning.
The machine moved because the sky moved first.
More than 2,000 years ago, someone built a machine that could calculate the sky. And then, much of this mechanical tradition seems to disappear from the surviving record.
No surviving text explains exactly who built it.
Nothing of comparable mechanical complexity survives again for centuries.
The machine survived, but the tradition behind it did not.
For centuries, the evidence rested beneath the Mediterranean.
And for nearly 2,000 years, the machine remained silent.
Empires rose and collapsed above the sea, while the fragments remained below. The knowledge behind the mechanism faded from human memory. And still the fragments waited beneath the sea. Then, in the early 20th century, the silence was broken. A machine forgotten by history began to emerge once again. When the fragments were recovered, nobody realized what they had found. At first, it looked like little more than damaged bronze. Then, researchers discovered something hidden inside the fragments. The discovery forced historians to rethink what the ancient world was capable of.
This was not a decorative object. It was a machine designed to calculate the heavens.
The Antikythera Mechanism did not just survive history. It changed history again.
It was not just a tool. It was a system for modeling reality.
The true achievement was not the bronze itself, but the knowledge encoded inside it. Across 2,000 years, the machine allowed one civilization to speak to another. The Antikythera Mechanism reminds us that intelligence can survive and still be lost.
And if one such machine survived by accident, how much else has disappeared?
Beneath corrosion, silence, and centuries of darkness, the machine was still waiting to be understood.